Hello, my friends, and welcome. Come on in. Join me here on today's episode of Stand Up, where my guest is Puck News' Tara Palmeri. Big deal. Very excited to have her. That conversation begins at 16 minutes in. So let's get it started, huh? Stand Up. Yeah, February 20th. I hope you had a good President's Day. I hope you had that day off. I have been working these last 2 days a lot so that I can take the day off tomorrow and take Julia skiing, then bring her to see her sister up at college. You'll see my parents. So I've taped enough interviews for you this week, and I still got more to go. I'll try to keep doing the news segments, although I don't think we'll have one on Thursday morning because there just won't be any time to do it. But I appreciate your understanding and support. Anytime I get to spend time with my girls, I'm taking that opportunity. So skiing this Wednesday. Can't wait. Special dad and Julia time. And I'm coming out to Vegas. I hope I get to have some special time with you. Join us in Las Vegas, March 22nd and 23rd. It's Pod Jam. We're going to have podcast tapings. We're going to have comedy and music. It is going to be like a 3-day party. So come on out early. Get there the 21st if you can. And the show's on the 23rd, and all the information is in the show notes. Every day I do a news roundup. It is better than anything you're going to find anywhere else. I've got headlines and I've got sound. So let's get to it. Looking at what happened yesterday. Let's just start with this fun story where a new survey from over 150 presidential historians, presidential specialists, and recent members of the American Political Science Association asked to give every president in America a score from 0 to 100. Presidential historians rank President Biden as the 14th best president in U.S. history. And guess where former President Trump comes in, according to these 154 presidential experts contributing to the 2024 Presidential Greatness Project. Donald Trump is last. That's right. Donald Trump comes in last place. Abe Lincoln topped the list with an average score of 95. Then it was Roosevelt, Washington, Teddy Roosevelt, Jefferson, Truman. Obama comes in at 7. Number 8 is Eisenhower. Then LBJ, and number 10, JFK. How about that? I'll have some audio for you on that in a moment, too. All right, now to a little less fun news. Let's go overseas to the Red Sea, specifically, where American forces hit an undersea drone during 5 self-defense strikes against Houthi rebels in areas of Yemen controlled by Iran-backed rebels, apparently. This is the first time U.S. forces have observed Houthis using an unmanned underwater vessel since the group began attacking merchant and commercial ships. The Biden administration responded to missile and drone attacks on ships by establishing a multinational maritime security force back in December. U.S. and U.K. have conducted several strikes on Houthi targets this year in response to further attacks on the vessels in the Red Sea. You got to watch this 60 Minutes piece on it on CBS. Thought that was pretty good. Shout out to Ty Randolph for giving me a heads up on that. Apparently, the Houthis also were able to sink a British ship, or at least heavily damage a British ship. The reporting on that, I'm not sure why. It's a little sketchy still, but those are the headlines coming out of the Red Sea shipping lanes today. Western leaders gathered in Munich at the Munich Security Conference. They discussed Vladimir Putin's ambitions and the unreliability of the U.S. support. A lot of stories coming out of that conference. Russian authorities detained at least 366 people as thousands of Russians publicly mourned the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. The widow of Alexei Navalny said on Monday, her name is Yulia Navalnaya, that she would carry on her husband's work to challenge President Vladimir Putin's autocratic rule, presenting herself for the first time as a political force and calling on his followers to rally alongside her. Mr. Navalny's sudden death, writes the New York Times, in prison, which was announced by the Russian authorities on Friday, left a vacuum in a decimated Russian opposition. His supporters had wondered whether his wife, who had long shunned the spotlight, might step in. Despite immense challenges to fill the void, and in a video released on Monday, she signaled that she would. She said she was appearing on her husband's YouTube channel for the first time to tell his followers that the best way to honor his legacy was to, quote, fight more desperately and furiously than ever before. She said, I'm going to continue the work of Alexei Navalny and continue to fight for our country. I call on you to stand beside me, to share not only in the grief and endless pain that has enveloped us and won't let go. I ask you to share my rage, my anger and hatred of those who have dared to kill our future. A ferocious response from Yulia Navalnaya. I've reached out to Bill Browder in hopes that he'll be able to join me tomorrow or the next day. We'll see. I'll let you know. And in other headlines overseas from the Middle East, the International Court of Justice began hearing arguments about 50 countries on Israel's policy in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. Israel does not recognize the court's jurisdiction, but still it has credibility. I'll be closely watching that. The American ambassador to the UN said the U.S. would not support an upcoming Security Council resolution that calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, so that's going to be a controversial story. Israel, for its part, is threatened to invade Gaza's southernmost city of Rafah by the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, which begins March 10th, if the remaining hostages are not released by Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister, who President Biden thinks is an asshole, apparently, so does anybody who's ever met the man, Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to finish the job in Gaza as ceasefire talks have stalled, with Netanyahu instead saying a hostage release can be achieved through strong military action and tough negotiations. More than 29,000 people have been killed in Gaza since the war began, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. More than 69,000 injured and thousands more are missing and presumed dead. Israeli military officials said at least 233 soldiers have been killed during the ground invasion in Gaza. Back here at home now, the Biden administration awarded $1.5 billion to a New York-based chip maker, Global Foundries. The grant will go toward chips for the auto and defense industries, the largest award to date from the $39 billion in government funding. Funding represents an effort by the Biden administration and lawmakers of both parties to try to revitalize American semiconductor manufacturing. Currently, just 12% of chips are made in the United States, with the bulk manufactured in Asia. The award to Global Foundries will help the firm expand its existing facility in Malta, New York, enabling it to fill a contract with General Motors to ensure dedicated chip production for its cars. Big deal for the people of Malta. Also, breaking news last night, Capital One is apparently set to acquire Discover Card in a $35 billion deal. The acquisition is, of course, subject to regulatory approval, but it would combine two of the largest credit card companies in the United States. I didn't even know Discover was still a thing, but that's big news breaking on Monday night. How about this headline I saw in a couple different places, but here's Axios reporting a record number of Americans will turn 65 this year, about 4.1 million. The Wall Street Journal reporting from an analysis by their chief economist. So I guess I should be getting credit to the Wall Street Journal. But the surge of 65-year-old baby boomers born anywhere between 46 and 64 will continue through 2027. AARP calls it the silver tsunami. So if you're in that category, happy birthday and congratulations. You did it. And ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, those are all the headlines I've got for you on Monday, President's Day. I think it was kind of a slow news day. Maybe it was because it was President's Day, but let's now get to the sound clips I've got for you in the audio section of the news segment. Let's start with reaction from the disgraced former president's former spokeswoman, Kayleigh McEnany, to those all-time presidential historian rankings. This is fun.
A new ranking, and I'm going to add, in my view, a highly questionable ranking of presidents, is turning heads after Biden came in higher than both Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan in his wildest dreams. The survey was done by the Presidential Greatness Project, who claim to be the foremost organization of social science experts in presidential politics. They may be the foremost example of the disconnect between ivory tower academia and real people. That aside, Abe Lincoln ranked first. Okay, fair. Then comes Obama at 7th, and Biden came in 14th, actually beating Ronald Reagan, who came in 16th, and Trump dead last. Look, Lisa, where to begin? This is infuriating in so many ways. 154 respondents. They are the ivory tower elites who in no way represent the view of the American people.
No, but it also goes to show you, though, how history can be written, and some of it can be built off a lie as well. But no, this list is bogus. Everyone knows that, Obama's not that high. He was a terrible president. But I think on this president, sorry, I think on this is just my thought bubbles. You don't want to know what goes on in here. It's a lot.
All right. Yeah, no, we do want to know what goes on in there, Lisa. You sound real sharp. Here now, let's stay with Fox News with another smart cat. This is a woman named Tomi Lahren, who is a very controversial idiot that somehow has become an influential voice on the right. And I think historians probably took this into account before ranking Trump as the worst president in history. But here she is, Tomi Lahren on Fox News.
I can seriously see those, but nobody merchandises like Donald Trump does. There is nobody who can move merch like Donald Trump. I've never seen any Joe Biden merchandise anywhere. Nikki Haley has tried it. She has failed. Donald Trump knows what he's doing. And if we want to talk about connecting with young people, maybe not the worst idea in the world. Right.
Yeah, they're talking about his sneakers that cost $399, the golden sneakers. Did you see that? Did you get yourself a pair? Did you pick up a pair? I'm not sure how appealing they will be to old white people. Mark Anderson Listener Mark Anderson put that on Facebook. I thought that was hilarious. And I also like this from Bakari Sellers, who is on CNN, and Kate Collins asked him what he thought about the Trump sneakers.
Obviously, he's facing intense legal expenses, and this is something that we've seen him do time and time again, whether it's the trading cards, now gold sneakers.
And he's just these air impeachments just simply are not going to sell. I mean, that's first. And second, I don't know if you recall, but they gave the 44th president of the United States of America so much hell because he used a selfie stick or because he wore a brown suit. I mean, people literally said that was beneath the office. And here you have a former president of the United States running for president again, who's hawking these they actually don't look that bad, but who's hawking these bright gold shoes for $400. I mean, look, I might rock them if they weren't like Air January 6s. Like they don't look that bad. But you know, this is literally beneath the office, and I think most Americans are become desensitized. We used to hold President of the United States to a higher standard. Now you can look at your child and be like, I don't want you to be like Donald Trump. Be something else.
Bakari Sellers on CNN with some funny jokes making fun of those sneakers. All right, well, Nikki Haley's campaign announced that she'll be making a major announcement today. I'm sure it's just that she's going to stay in the race. But here she is ripping Trump on the campaign trail for a small group in South Carolina whose primary is this weekend.
You've got Donald Trump, who said on a stage in Conway that not only would he not defend NATO countries if they didn't pull their weight, but that he would encourage Putin to invade the countries if they didn't pull their weight. Now, keep in mind, that means Trump is siding with a thug where 500,000 have been wounded or murdered because Putin invaded Ukraine. He sided with a dictator who kills his political opponents. He sided with a tyrant who's made no bones about wanting to destroy America. You're going to side with something like that over the allies who stood with us at 9/11? What are we doing? We all want them to pull their weight, without question. But you don't go and put our allies in harm's way and our military who are serving there right now in harm's way. And what's Putin's response? Now he's putting forces around the Baltic countries. And guess what? He said, once he takes Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries, and that puts America at war. We are trying to prevent war. We should always try and prevent war.
And a tacit applause for Nikki Haley at her appearance on the campaign trail in Sumter, South Carolina. Sounds good. Nikki Haley also appeared on Fox and Friends yesterday morning, where she also criticized Trump and his relationship with Russia and Putin.
Ambassador, you were the ambassador to the United Nations during the Trump administration. Are you and the former president on the same page when it comes to Russia?
Not at all. I mean, it's amazing to me how weak in the knees he is when it comes to Putin, because you look at the fact he has yet to say anything about Navalny's death, which Putin murdered him. It's what he does to his political opponents. He's yet to say anything about seizing Russian assets and allowing that money to go to Ukraine. Why would you not want to have those assets seized? It's sitting in Congress. He should be calling for that. He doesn't talk about anything. All he does is go on late night rants talking about his court cases. And Steve, that's the problem. We have Russia sitting there doing things. They're now surrounding the Baltics, which if they go and invade the Baltics, those are NATO countries. That puts America at war. We have to prevent war. We've got China doing these cyber attacks. We're seeing all of these things happen, and Trump's doing late night rants about his court cases. He's going to be in court for the rest of the year. We can't be distracted. But more of that, that's why I continue to say if Donald Trump is the nominee, he can't win. He won't win a general election. And the focus we need to have is how do we protect Americans? How do we prevent war? How do we get the border secure? How do we get our economy back on track? Not his personal grievances.
Sure, says Steve Ducey. And finally, let's check in with the great comedian Jay Alcovan, because I like to end on a laugh, and nobody does a better Trump impression than him, and no one has a better, faster, funnier, quicker reactions to news that Trump makes or is about to make. He often predicts basically what he's going to say. So here's his latest.
So with today being President's Day, which is a very sacred day to me, because, as you know, I'm still president, and a lot of people say the greatest president we've ever had. How about that? Of all of them. I thought I would roast people on the internet. They like to, sir, you must roast. You got to roast them. So we're going to roast all the presidents from second best to the absolute worst. And let's see. He had horrible teeth.
George Washington.
And he gave up the presidency like in the most weak fight. He wouldn't fight. He wouldn't fight for the president. He was probably one of the weakest people we've ever had. He was short, fat, the first one-term president we ever had, and also his HBO miniseries was very boring.
Bill Clinton.
He made a big mistake because though I respect sleeping with the people who work for you, he never got them to sign NDAs, and I thought he was like a lawyer. He was very stupid on that. He should have gotten a lot of NDAs. So.
And he goes on from there. He does literally, he's insane, J.L. Covan. He did Trump tributing all of the 45 other presidents in U.S. history. Real funny, and I highly recommend you go watch it. All right? Well, that is what I've got for you on today's news section. Now it's time to get to my guest, and I'm very excited to have her joining me for the very first time here on Stand Up. She has had a lot of really prestigious jobs covering Washington politics. She's a journalist who is now senior political correspondent for Puck News, which you should definitely subscribe to. They do a lot of really interesting, great reporting over there. She's worked at the Washington Examiner. She worked at the New York Post. She worked at CNN and Politico, and she was the White House correspondent at ABC News. Definitely follow her on TikTok and Twitter and Instagram, and check out her podcast, which is really good. It's on the Ringer Network. It's called Somebody's Gotta Win. I'm real excited to have Tara Palmeri joining me for the first time. I hope that you will tweet her or let her know however you want to that you enjoyed this discussion. Let's do it right now with Tara Palmeri. Oh, what a big deal it is to have Tara Palmeri joining us. I've just told everybody about all of your stuff, and I can't believe I've never had you on the show, but I'm very honored.
Thank you for having me.
Excited.
No, I'm honored. This is fun.
Yes, it should be a huge honor for you to join my podcast.
It is an honor. I love seeing you on CNN and just been following your work. So this is great.
Awesome.
Also, we need to get some laughs out right now in this tense time, right?
All the time, whenever possible.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much suffering and misery and confusion and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we can make fun of it or ourselves or the process of the life that we're having, for sure. I mean, maybe what is I want to talk with you a little bit about obviously your career, but first of all, let's just talk. I just want to make sure anybody listening knows about your podcast, because I love it, and I learn a lot. You have access to pretty much the smartest people in all of politics and media. Somebody's got to win with Tara Palmeri. You've done it all. White House correspondent. You've done everything. So what is it about this podcast that you like, or why are you doing it?
Having a podcast is awesome, right? I mean, it's the one time you sort of are able to just be you and not have to worry about, what is the right question. Well, it's not like highly produced. There's not, 30-second time slot to get in your 4 talking points. You can actually breathe, talk to your guests, have a deeper conversation, veer, you don't have to do the gotcha, it's sound clips. It's nice. And I think I like having a variety of guests on. I feel like, I realized I had 2 conservatives on, and I was like, you know what? It's probably a good idea for me to have someone who is a Democrat and like a defender of the administration on. And I like to sort of mix it up. I don't do it all in the same show because I want everybody to be able to breathe, and be able to tell their side. And I try to, unspin people because everyone has their book. Doesn't matter who they are. The easiest people to talk to are journalists, but sometimes they can be really guarded too, especially if they come from legacy outlets. They're totally paranoid about taking any stand on anything. And I don't mean like partisan stand, but like even just like an analysis or an opinion on something that is like so blatantly obvious. And I think some of the journalists are really great to have on. Like I love having Jonathan Allen on from NBC. He just has so much experience covering the Democratic Party. that he can just like drop in and be like, well, this happened you don't remember this exactly, but this happened in 2008. Well, the DNC, and he's really great about it. And I've just made like friends with sources on the ground in various like battleground states like New Hampshire and like Matthew Bartlett, who I have on a lot. And I'm learning as I go. Well, this is a new adventure.
I think that though, someone told me when I wanted to start the podcast of leaving corporate media, I was like, I don't know what makes me special. And it took someone, that pretty smart person I admire to tell me, like, you have social capital, everybody, but that's truer of you than almost anybody. I mean, like, I'm not going to take anything away from your journalism, your career, your ability to do a good job at the work. But the bottom line is, like, who can't you get on your podcast? And more importantly, you generally
Joe
will know.
Biden. Actually, I can't get Joe Biden on my show. We've tried. He was thinking about it. And now they said no. And we really did try. And now Donald Trump has offered to come on the show. We'll see. Because it's, you really got to be prepared for that one. I want to wait at least until he's like the nominee. But because it's just like you're giving him a platform and you really have to be prepared, right?
Well, my feeling,
he can hijack your show.
Yeah, no. So my feeling is pretty simple on him, on interviewing him. Not that I'll have the opportunity, but as long as you do it on tape, I think interviewing him live is ethically wrong.
When you get hijacked, everyone looks like a heel that interviewed by Trump, right?
You can't.
I mean, everyone looks like a heel who interviews Trump. Sorry, I said that the wrong way.
Yeah, well, it's just very hard. I don't know. I'd ask your kind of ethical, decision or editorial decision. Like, if someone lies all the time, or is going to say certain things, then it would be irresponsible of you to put it out there without a pushback or a fact check. But who can know how to push back on something crazy? You've never even heard this claim, and you can't be prepared to push back on that. So I think if you tape the interview and you fact check it, then sure, he's the nominee.
I think Jonathan Swan did a great job in a taped interview, right, with HBO. That was brilliant. But you're right. You just have to be so ready for everything. And you don't know what he's going to throw at the wall. Maybe there's like a stop for a second, fact check. And maybe it's a post fact check. I don't know. It's like, again, though, he could be our next president. So he deserves the same scrutiny. You know what I mean? And I asked Nikki Haley to come on the show, and she did not want to come on. Her team for a long time did not want to do any comms at all. Like they were just Fox and Friends. It was like Fox. Yeah. Barely on the Sunday shows. Now that she's sort of on her last leg, she's willing to do shows, but I don't even know. It's like, probably not going to be around for the next week. Let me tell you when the last time you're going to hear about Nikki Haley. Hold on a second. I'll look at my phone. Well, probably February 24th will be the last time you talk about Nikki Haley.
And that's based on the primary that week. Mm-hmm. But I thought, I was talking to somebody smart. I felt like if you're Nikki Haley, why would you not stay in until your money runs out? Does that when her money runs out too? Because Trump could die or get go to jail or whatever. Things could happen, and then she's going to be left there. Or I guess, Tara, like to the convention. Why not stay into the convention if you have the money, just in case something happens?
Yeah, I guess if you have the money, you could keep going. But like losing in your home state by 30 points, that could kind of like wreck your political career for the rest of your life. I mean, sure, fine. She could stay in there, but I still don't see the path. After Super Tuesday, you don't get delegates. It's like winner takes all.
Right.
And so, I mean, maybe at the convention, she could argue I have the most delegates of anyone who was Trump. But here's the thing, like people always say to me, Trump, what if he's in prison? Then they need a backup plan, right? First of all, he's not going to be in prison before November 5th, right? Like that's just not happening. And he's not going to drop out of the race because of his legal problems. He's running because of his legal problems. He is running to be able to exonerate himself. I mean, also he wants to hold on to power, but that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, sure.
So I hear that argument all the time. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is someone who wants to be able to, like, the threat of an orange jumpsuit is why he's running.
Tara, you covered the Trump White House for ABC News. You had full access to everything. I mean, I guess I don't know what to ask other than what was that like? What was it like? I mean, you could write a book about it. You could talk about it all day. I'm sure there's things you can never really share, whatever. But like, It wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't a particularly, in my opinion, from what I've heard from a lot of the women that worked in the White House, it wasn't a particularly safe space. for women sometimes, and just for reporters in general. What was it like covering the Trump White House? I don't know what my specific question is, so anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I never felt like physically threatened or anything like that, or like thought that there was like sexual like overtones at the White House. But I just think it was like, yeah, there was aggression between Trump and the reporters. Like that was obvious. And I think he did treat women differently than men. I think he found like women and minorities to be like kind of annoying, particularly in their questioning. Just even the way they ask questions. Like I remember one time he said to Cecilia Vega, who's my colleague at the time, like, "You're dumb. You have the worst questions." Like he would just put them down in ways that maybe I don't think he would talk to a man the same way. The access thing, like I will say that like it was just, the White House was like a sieve. Like it was just leaking everywhere and you could just break stories so easily. Whereas this White House is way more controlled and they are much more deliberate in their leaks. Although I see them and I know them because the leaks mainly are about like showing Joe Biden seeming angry and in control behind the scenes, right? Because of the image that you see when he's in front of the camera, which is not great. Well, in Trump, you like, they just let the cameras roll all the time. It was like a reality show. It was essentially like watching the Real Housewives or like the real, like, it was like watching the real president of DC. Like you walk into every single room. He just wanted the cameras to roll. He didn't care about the drama, like the shouting of questions, the this, the that, like it was a whole nother world. And the access was weirdly better. It is. I mean, the current White House is very protective of Biden. Whereas like, there was no way you could be protective of Trump because Trump didn't really want to be protected. He came from like the New York City tabloid mindset of like, all press is good press. Who cares? And I think his team just like, they didn't come from that world, but they got used to it. And they sort of were like, okay. I mean, when Stephanie Grisham was press secretary for like a minute, I don't even think she ever actually went on the stand and took questions. She just let Trump take all the questions all the time. It was kind of crazy. If you look back on it. But then again, the answers were bonkers and a lot of them were lies. So I don't know what's better, like a shielded president or like one that's off his rocker. Cause like, I do think at the end of the day, like you're still the president. Like you need to be out there and answering questions too.
Yeah. I mean, I think we could talk about the Obama administration and how that was different than both probably, Yeah. I mean, I always thought it was great when he was speaking. He generally got his message heard. Was obviously, there were times and days and press conferences that got shrouded by other controversies and so on. But I mean, they were pretty tight and on message, and overwhelmingly the people that worked for him had respect and liked for him. I feel like he's the difference in our lifetime.
Yeah. He had the bully pulpit and he knew how to use it. Yeah. And like the problem with the Biden campaign is like, I think that they've guarded him, or the Biden White House has guarded him for so long and hid him for so long. And now that he needs the bully pulpit, like he's getting some bad press from her report, et cetera. I don't think they know how to actually harness it now when he needs it most.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, going back to your podcast back in, I don't know, maybe it was October, somebody's got to win. Everybody, it's a big deal podcast. We're very happy to have Tara joining us with all of the people that she's talking to over there. You did ask the question about why is Biden running? Like, what was the decision behind that, do you think, for the family, the administration, for the Democratic machine? Because there was a point where a lot of us look and say, if he had bowed out then, he would have been considered one of the greatest presidents of our time in terms of achievements, in terms of legislation passed. There can be no doubt. And you could have this, robust race. But, people are divided over that. What should have happened, what could have happened. But just take me back there for one moment. Like when that decision happened, like what went into it?
It's a great question. Why did he decide to run again when they had said that he was going to be a bridge essentially to another generation? Because I think the feeling was when he was elected around the age of like 78, I guess, there was a feeling like just a one-term presidency. He saved us from Trump. Like he did his job. Then he managed to pass like crazy, amazing legislation that progressives could have only dreamt of, right? Kind of weird to not hear like AOC squawking at all. And then we're kind of in this position right now where it's like, you're seeing someone who is clearly not great in front of the cameras anymore. He's not, and like, he doesn't look good anymore, and he's having problems with gaffes, et cetera. And it's not really confidence inspiring, but here's the thing about like Biden and his family. he has a big chip on his shoulder. Like, he's already been told how many times not to run. In 2016, Obama told him not to run, right? He believes that he can beat Trump because he beat him last time, which is true. My only argument against that is that, like, in 2019 and 2020, he was always leading Trump in the polls. Always. There was never a moment. And it was by like 5 to 10 points, sometimes as many as 15 points in the battleground states. A lot of them. And even the Trump people I spoke to at the time, they're like, yep, we're packing up our bags. It's over. Shit show. It's going to be done. And in the end, the election basically came down to 40,000 votes in the battleground states. Obviously, he won the popular vote, and Trump will never win the popular vote. But if this is really going to come down to the 7 battleground states, like, it's going to be a tight race because Trump is leading him now. And they've never been really good at polling Trump voters. Like, it's a problem that they've never been good at. Although a lot of people say the polling right now is off because a lot of the specials 2022, like, it was supposed to be a wipeout for Democrats, but Dobbs activated the abortion decision, activated a lot of voters. So who knows? Maybe the White House is right. But I just think, like, a lot of people are feeling that they're not feeling very confident about Joe Biden as a president, but he's decided himself that he wants to run for re-election. And unless somebody primaries him, which they tried to do, Dean Phillips, there's nothing you can do about it. I just think it's the idea that he'll be 86 at the end of his term. There's not a lot of confidence in Kamala. And it's not like, I think that Jon Stewart summed it up really well when he was like, the barbarian is at the gate, right? It's Trump. And so we need, like, the best person, as in we, he means the Democrats need the strongest person to take him on. And they don't feel that, like, Biden is that person. Now, could Biden win? Sure. But the case is crazy versus old. You know what I mean? Take old over crazy, and Dobbs and democracy, which I don't know that people like democracy. Yeah, no, I think,
well, let me ask you about that. I mean, and obviously some people will look at Trump as, being equally as old. It depends, they're both old.
But I would argue that we voted for Biden when he was older than Trump in the last election, right? And age was not the story,
right?
All along. So that's like, well, and I get it. Trump is old. His mental acuity is off. It always was, though. I mean, honestly, you could probably argue that he was always like this.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, he has an attention issue where he just meanders back and forth. He doesn't finish sentences and so on. It's always been that way. Yeah.
He definitely seems more energetic. He seems younger.
I think that's true, especially in interviews and at rallies. Let me just, going back though, I mean, like, your show is following the campaign. Somebody's got to win. It's right. The president. It covers the presidential campaign. And we have to cover the presidential campaign, and they go on for way too long in this country. And we can talk about what's wrong with our silly system. But I wonder, based on what you just said, if we're talking too much, Tara, about a bunch of things which all matter, when in effect, it might come down to one thing, especially in those states, and that's women's reproductive rights. So when you say Dobbs, you mean the overturning of abortion. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we talk a lot about a lot of different things, immigration, guns, and any democracy, and but nothing will animate people more than having their vote taken away. And the only thing other than that, having your reproductive rights taken away. And I just wonder how much you think about just that being the issue that animates voters, and especially in the states that matter the most that you mentioned.
Yeah, I absolutely think you're right. I think reproductive rights are going to be animating. I just saw this election, though, the George Santos seat that was filled, and migration was actually a top concern. Migration is up there, by the way, with reproductive rights. Like, Democrats and Republicans are putting it at the top of their list of concerns with economic security. And that was an interesting race because, like, the Democrat leaned into reproductive rights, but even more so, he leaned into the idea that, like, the border, that the Democrats were trying to fix the border and the Republicans blew up the bill. And that worked for him. He won by 8 points. That was supposed to be a really tight race. And Swazi outperformed. So I think Democrats are feeling very hopeful about that and that they have a good messaging.
Do you think that matters? Do you think that issue of like, the truth is, and I've covered immigration since Obama was president, that Republicans have never wanted to solve this issue. When Republicans in the Senate voted for it and passed out of a very divided Senate when Barack Obama was president, went to the House, John Boehner wouldn't take it up for a vote because they were worried it might pass and then they wouldn't have the issue. And now everybody's kind of come to that as conventional wisdom. And when they blame the White House and the executive branch, it's like, how much do you really think they can do on immigration reform, much less the border and security? Republicans had the dream security bill, for more, quote, extreme as progressives like me would say, than anything else. It was billions in security. They had it. They voted against it. I don't think, Tara, that Republican voters are really going to know that or care about that they can't get anything done, and that they literally had a security bill that would have done so much to affect the agenda that they've wanted for a generation, and they voted against it. I just don't think that narrative filters out to the electorate in the states that matter. I'd love to be wrong, but you seem to think that them Republicans not being able to do anything does matter. I've seen others say that too.
It's just interesting because like migration really was in the forefront of this suburb. It's like a wealthy enclave outside of New York. It's where the Great Gatsby was, the inspiration for the Great Gatsby, and the fear of migrants coming in was huge. And, that's what Republicans have long used as like a cudgel. And basically Swazi was like, yeah, we tried to fix that and they decided not to. Right. And it seemed to work for him. Like, I felt like he leaned into that even more than abortion rights. And that's likely because it's a blue state. Like New York I don't imagine New York ever, who knows? If the Republicans win, is there a way that there would be a national abortion ban? I don't think so. Like, I don't think the Senate will ever have the numbers to pull that off. It would be like 2/3, and it doesn't look like that will happen. So maybe New Yorkers are just like less motivated by the abortion argument because they have access to it. But then again, you have, it's in the New York City area, but it's kind of Tony's. I don't know. It's hard to say. But I think in some of these red, like Georgia, the abortion argument might be really strong. That's a battleground state.
I feel like the best argument for this was Kentucky and that one ad of a 10-year-old girl.
Oh my God.
Like amazing. If you run those ads in swing states,
right,
whether it's likely or not that state would ban abortion, I feel like it's got to motivate people. And the people that aren't paying attention.
Democrats need to keep whipping out ads like that. Yeah. And you're right. That might help them win. Like it might not. So here's my theory of 2020. And you could tell me if I'm totally wrong. I don't think people went out to vote for Biden. I think they went out to vote against Trump.
I think that's, but I think it's right. And I think it's way more right now than ever. Like if you nominate a disease infested rodent, on the Democratic ticket, people would still vote for it because they're not voting for it. They're like, I probably won't get that disease. They're voting against that guy. I feel like I don't have the data for it, but it does seem like we've seen this nightmare before. And then we saw what happened on January 6th, and we see all these criminal indictments. We see this guy. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. We believe him. We're voting against him. Welcome to the White House. Disease-infested rat.
I don't know that the criminal indictments are as strong as the Democrats think they are. I don't think that they're that strong to swing voters. But here's what I do think. Women have always hated Trump, basically, and voted against him. And I do think that Biden rode the Black Lives Matter wave, right? He rode the disgust over the George Floyd murder and COVID. And Biden had the advantage of early mail-in voting. Trump sabotaged himself with that. But I just think with Gaza and the protesters right now, they are the same young people, African Americans who are Black Lives Matter protesters. And now they're protesting against Biden. He needs them too. He needs them to come out and vote. And he needs them to activate their friends. He needs them to do the Democrats, the not door knocking, because we didn't door knock in COVID, okay? But we need to door knock now. They need enthusiasm. It's going to be a nail biter of a race. I just had Congressman Boyle from.
I heard that. I heard that whole interview. It was a good example of you.
He was like, I think it's going to come down to 0.5 percentage point in Pennsylvania. Maybe that's right, but I think it might come down to 0.5 percentage point in every battleground state. And that's why having these kids be furious at Biden, and then maybe they vote for Cornel West. Maybe they vote for Jill Stein. Like, just ask Hillary Clinton about Jill Stein, you know?
They maybe more likely though, maybe they just stay home. They're not at all motivated to vote.
That's worse.
Is the
That's
concern.
Worse.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's worse. It's the same thing as handing your vote to Cornel West, you know, like they need to activate these kids. I think the resistance wine moms are going to be out anyway. Like, I really do. I think they're going to be out there voting. Yeah. Suburban white women, like, they're out there.
The joke I did back in 2020 was that we would have voted for COVID if it was on the ballot. Like, it was during COVID. We would have swam through a river of COVID to get to the polls to vote for COVID because because the pandemic was still killing people at that time. Right. Like, that motivated people. And a lot of, smart people argue that Trump would have gotten reelected without the pandemic. But I think that's probably true.
I think Trump would have gotten reelected if he didn't sabotage himself with the mail-in voting. I hate to say it. I mean, like, I don't know. Well, I'm not I can't say that, like, I can't actually say that based on numbers, but I think it was such a close race that's why we can't, like, that's why Democrats cannot feel comfortable going into this next election, because 2020 was so close. Now, Dobbs may have changed the equation. Maybe they're right, but the polling sucks for Biden right now. Every battleground state, except for Pennsylvania, by the way, shows Trump beating Biden by like 4 points, 5 points, some of them. And these aren't like, Tony Fabrizio, GOP polls, John McLaughlin, Trump's favorite pollsters. They're NBC, ABC, Harvard, Ipsos, Quinnipiac. Every poll for months has showed Trump beating Biden in battleground states.
But as you know, as someone just keeps reminding me, as I remind myself, polling this far out, much less polling close. Polling has bad polling. So I don't know.
Polling this far out, 2020 showed Biden kicking Trump's ass. Like, kicking Trump's ass.
Yeah, I'm sure it did at that point. But I want to ask you about media's influence. You've been everywhere. Okay. And, well, you've been at, I think the resume, let me just take it off. If it's right, where my research, New York Post, Washington Examiner, CNN, ABC, Politico, Puck. Who'd I miss?
Yeah. And a little stint in Europe, Politico Europe, for 2 years. I helped them launch that.
So
which is cool.
I would classify all that in pretty similar, except maybe like the Post and Washington Examiner, but it's still like, it's a newspaper. They're newspapers, but they're still corporate. But the Post is whatever.
Very corporate.
The News Corp, whatever. So somebody might say that's conservative or something. I think all these other outlets that you've worked at have, they're traditional legacy media, as you've talked about. Puck is obviously a new thing and trying to compete in a world of newer, smaller, more independent entities. But my question to you is more about, I don't think that progressive media, really strong progressive media, influences progressive policymakers very much. I think activists do. I think all kinds of things do. But I think conservative media, as I've always thought this, and I just want to get your take on it, has dominated the conversation. Like I think that Donald Trump and Republican legislators up and down the tickets in the Senate and the House, they do take their marching orders from Sean Hannity, Ben Shapiro, and some of these more extreme people, not to mention the names that we know on Fox News and so on. And I think that's always been the case. And I wonder how you think about media's influence on actual policymakers at any level, local, state, and certainly the federal level, the national level, which you've covered. I think there's a real asymmetrical effect when it comes to progressive media and its influence versus conservative and right-wing media and its.
And when you talk about progressive media, do you mean like MSNBC, or do you see that as corporate?
I would call them progressive at this point.
Okay.
I mean, the other night, who was it that closed his show? Lawrence O'Donnell closed his show with like 2 wins for Democrats tonight, 2 things to be happy about. And I was like, I mean, they're almost overwhelmingly.
I consider all those people like being writers on the op-ed columns of newspapers. Like, I would consider like a Lawrence O'Donnell being like an op-ed columnist at like the New York Times, and Hannity being like, an op-ed columnist at like the New York Post. Do you know what I mean? Like, I see them that way. Now, I see people like Ben Shapiro and Steve Bannon, like on a daily caller, like having their own, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And Tucker. And then I don't even know, like, what are progressives reading anymore? I feel like the truly like the progressives that are even further to the left in the Times, like, are they reading Mother Jones? Like, what's this? What is it that they're reading?
Yeah, we're reading The Nation, Mother Jones, Democracy Now, and I think there's a million podcasts and YouTube, the David Pakman, and there's, the Majority Report. I think, but my point is that they don't actually really have any ability to pressure. Put all the most successful, influential progressive broadcasters and throw NBC, MSNBC in there with it. In the end, I don't think AOC or Joe Biden really answers to them, as opposed to example after example after example of Sean Hannity and all of the rest, really almost creating policy for Republican. And by the way, demanding that Republican politicians in the Senate or the House do a thing that they cannot do.
Well, here's what I think. And I think that the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats right now is that Joe Biden is not a progressive. He was not the progressive choice. He wouldn't have won the Democratic primary without everyone dropping out and getting behind him, right? He's not a progressive. Trump is a grassroots candidate. The establishment did not want him ever. They didn't even want them this past time. Mitch McConnell didn't want him. Donors got behind Ron DeSantis. Everybody in the Republican establishment wanted anyone but Trump. But Trump has proven time and time again that he is the grassroots candidate. And because he owns the grassroots, he owns the media. And the media, as much as you think that they're not influencing him, he's influencing them. He's having late night calls with Sean Hannity, and he's telling him, and Sean Hannity gives him advice, like, endorse Mehmet Oz, this guy, but at the end of the day, it all funnels from Trump down. And all those guys in the media, all they can do is like float ideas that Trump will maybe take. And everyone below them, the rank and file congressmen, the senators, they're just taking the trickle from Trump down to the media and down. And it isn't like, I've never seen anything like this before. This man controls the party in such a way that I have never seen. You cannot defy him. Anyone who has defied Trump loses, and they have no future in the Republican Party. Mitt Romney, what's his name? Sorry, Cheney. You've got Adam Kinzinger. Anyone who tries to defy Trump gets primaried. They have no future in the party and they cannot survive. It's insane. I do not think that Biden has that power over the Democratic Party. The progressives, for the most part, out of fear of Trump, have kept quiet. Like, AOC has been supportive, and he's done the same, and he's given them massive
quiet in terms of holding
wins.
their fire on criticism of Joe Biden overwhelmingly, outside of the
they've
issue
held their fire.
The Middle East.
As a progressive yourself, you can't think he's like your guy. You know what I mean? But the party decided he was the best person to run against Trump, and they may be right. Yep. But because the party decided and the people didn't decide it, like the true grassroots Democratic base, he can't really influence he doesn't have the same grip on the party.
I fully agree with that. And you make a lot of good points about Trump's influence. And I think when you say it's crazy, I think nowhere is there a better example than today's Republican Party's view on Russia. Then Trump has completely flipped them on an issue where they were always the staunchest critic. Lindsey Graham, John McCain, on and on throughout history. If anybody was in any way open to Russia and their government, it would be far leftists who are more supportive of big government being in charge. Right. The idea that overwhelmingly Republicans are not supporting Ukraine, or even worse, outspokenly supporting Vladimir Putin. Right. That's Donald Trump, right? I mean, what do you think of that one issue of him to illustrate, I think, your point?
I think you're absolutely right. Russia alone, Republicans being anti-NATO, there were always been war hawks. I think coming off of Afghanistan, that's another thing that helps Trump, right? This isolationism, Iraq, years of wars that went nowhere. He tapped. The thing about Trump is this Russia thing is weird. I will admit that, but you needed to have a feeling of wanting isolationism to get people there. And you also have a whole new generation that doesn't really remember the war in the same way, or didn't really experience the Cold War in the same way. but it's also like Medicare and Social Security. You would never hear Republicans being like, we're fighting for your Medicare and Social Security and entitlements. And Trump put his finger on the pulse of the base, his base, which is, I would say they would have been Democrats if they're now Republicans. And he's like, oh, they want that. When you see him in a rally, he says a lot of crazy shit, but he's also listening to the crowd. Yeah, and he wants to see what gets the most applause.
Yeah, I know.
And he doesn't care. He doesn't know the tenets of the Republican Party. He doesn't know the Federalist Society. Yeah. He doesn't know like AIPAC. He doesn't know any of it. He doesn't know heritage. He's like, I just got this feeling that this is what people want. And he taps into the anger and the rage. And
he creates it in a lot of ways too, right?
Yeah, he creates it. And it's like, it's also been kind of like befuddling for Democrats because they're like, wait, that's something that we would say. And I not love, but like the most interesting thing to me is like, okay, so I always talk about my dad on the show because he's a Trump voter, right? And we always have our our disagreements, but my dad loved Bernie and my dad liked Trump. And
my God.
There's a huge crossover in polling between Bernie supporters and Trump supporters, both anti-establishment disruptors, burn it down. What has existed forever, it has never worked for us. So like there's a crossover between Bernie voters and Trump voters. They found that at least in the beginning of the 2016. Probably not so much anymore, but
I want to interview your dad or hear those interviews.
Should I have my dad on my show? I was going to ask you that.
Oh, wait, I thought you were saying that you did.
No, we do this like off camera, but maybe I should just have him on.
Oh, hell yeah. Just listen. I don't know why I just said listen in a condescending way to you.
No, I'm totally down.
Here's what you do. Here's what you should do. Call your dad up and tape it and then decide. But don't do it. I don't
want to trick him into not knowing he's on camera. Or,
No. Tell him, Dad, I want to tape an interview. I don't know if I'm going to air it, but would you tape an interview with me to possibly air on the podcast? And then at the end of it, you ask him, how do you feel about that? I'm going to put that out there. This could happen. That could happen. And then what could happen. Your dad's going to get called a lot of names, guaranteed. But if he's okay with it, but obviously it'd be probably one of the most fascinating things you could do. No disrespect to the people you're talking to in your regular work, but
so the reason I am a journalist, by the way, is because I grew up in a household where my dad was listening to Hannity and Combs on the radio and like so into Republican politics. Like he was MAGA before there was MAGA, right? And my mom is like an immigrant from Poland, USSR, okay, but definitely more left leaning. But never felt comfortable to talk about her views. And I would be the one like debating with my dad at the dinner table.
Interesting.
And she's just like, don't upset your father. Like, don't upset your father. And I just sort of found myself in this place of like, what? Politics became such a huge part of life. And I was like, I can't not do this. I can't not be fascinated by it.
But that goes to my earlier point. Like the fact that your dad had this program that he listened to. I mean, I have heard that from countless Americans. There was a documentary years ago, my dad was radicalized by Rush Limbaugh or something. Like before
Rush Limbaugh, forgot about him. Yeah, my dad was radicalized by him. Before he started listening to this show or that show, he was, quote, normal, or he wasn't animated and upset about things. But when I started in radio, I was like, is there an opposite of that can succeed? And they told me no, but I'll never succeed the way those guys did. Are you joking? Like that's the silliest thing I've ever heard.
No, they told me even more specifically when I started my radio show at Sirius, a lot of the executives were against it, but the ones that mattered were for it. So I got my shot. And when I started, the people who were against it, it wasn't personal. I just didn't think my style would work. I had my boss at the time. I came out of the studio and he goes, I listened to you. He goes, you can never say, I don't know. Don't say, I don't know. You have to know. The people listening have to think you're the authority, that you're the smartest person in the room. And I was like, but I'm not.
That's true.
And I don't want to do that show. I don't know.
Right.
I want to host a show where I interview experts on health policy, on environmental policy, on all things, experts. I'm not a plumber. I'm not going to tell you how to fix your toilet. Like that's real life. Like I don't go to a social studies teacher and ask them about science. Like that's how the world works. I don't want to reinvent the world and be like, I'm the person who knows everything.
Also, you're passing along misinformation when you pretend to be an expert in everything because there's no way you can know everything. What was that?
I said, now that I'll do.
Yeah. No, it's true. I've been sort of told that too when I got into podcasting. It's like people have given me that advice of just be confident. You're the smartest person in the room. I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'd love to be, but I'm going to be honest. I know a lot. I know a lot more than people who don't work in politics know. I mean, I'm covering it day to day like a total nerd junkie, talking to the people who are involved in the policy and the politics. So yes, I have a deeper level, but am I smarter than the smartest person in the room?
But you've had two jobs, and at most of your jobs, you've had a job where you go and ask, for example, your job, correct me if I'm wrong, at ABC News as the White House correspondent, was you went and asked a bunch of questions to people in government, and then you walked out in front of a camera, and you told the audience, you told them what you learned. And so your job is asking questions. And when I listened to your interview with Congressman Boyle in your most recent episode of the podcast, what I hear is someone who's asking the right or tough questions to whoever they're interviewing. I don't really know necessarily your opinion. Sometimes, you share certain things and how you feel about certain things. And I love that. I'm glad that you do. But generally speaking, whoever your guest is, you're asking good questions. So to me, your job and my job as well, I haven't had your career and fashioned myself that way. Obviously, I started doing stand-up. But still, good questions are what makes a good interview. Ask the right questions.
But actually, the people who have gone into like political commentary and podcasting and radio and TV, a lot of them come from sports backgrounds, comedy backgrounds, and they're often the best. Like the wonks, they don't always make for the best.
Oh, no doubt about it. No, believe me, I've interviewed them all, and I have to edit them and find people who are. You're the smartest person in the room, but you're not good at communicating. I have to find somebody else.
You're too stuck in you're a technician. Yeah. You're too stuck in the details. You're so worried about saying the wrong thing that you lose people with that kind of conversation.
Go ahead.
No, keep going. Sorry about that.
I was just going to say, hence the difficulty with translating and sharing with the public information about things like medicine, COVID. It's very hard for a lot of those experts to then, that know the answers to then communicate in a way that we can understand and synthesize so that we can make the most responsible decisions for our health in that case. It's hard. It's not easy to talk about challenging, nuanced issues. But as you mentioned at the very beginning, that's what long form conversation is for, and certainly reporting is for. But we don't live in that world. We live in second to second. Tell me how to feel and where I should be outraged.
Yeah.
But I feel like you were about to say something.
Yeah. I have a question for you about just like coverage that you've seen the election. I struggle with this myself. Yeah. Obviously both sideism is like, people will say to me, they'll send me a message being like, oh my God, Trump just said he wants to have Putin invade a NATO country for not paying their share in the NATO. Trump's been saying that since 2017. Trump's been saying that since 2016. He's been saying he wanted to pull out of NATO. Everyone needs to pay their share. Some of them actually ended up paying more because of it. He's never gone so far as to say Putin should invade. That's true. That's like a whole escalation. But all of these things that like shock people about Trump, they don't shock me, because I'm like, he's been saying this forever. And the way that he hugged Putin in Helsinki, and it's like, oh my, it's just like, are we surprised? And in some ways, I think the shock and the horror of it, I'm sort of like, it doesn't impact me anymore. And I don't know if I'm become like jaded, or I just feel like, what you're getting with Trump. This is who he is. And I think that the more, I wonder if as journalists, if we're not like 5 alarm fire, like 5, if we're not doing that, are we not doing a duty, or should we just be like, are people annoyed that we do that? Or do they think,
I think it's a tough.
Trump has said something that is consistent with what he has said in the past, although he elevated it to another degree by inviting, a foreign power to invade, by inviting Vladimir Putin to invade, a NATO country. I don't know how to handle these things, because there's like a part of me that's like, it's Trump noise that we've heard, and people who have followed it very closely are like, oh yeah, that's exactly what he's been saying forever.
It's a great question that I think everybody has to grapple with. But the way I see it, based on what you're saying, is you've been covering this. Everybody. You've been inside the White House, Air Force One. You've traveled with the Secretary of State. You've done it all. You've done everything you can do. And you're so inside of it that it's hard sometimes, in my opinion, for us to remember that maybe somebody's hearing this for the first time. As a stand-up comic, and when I would go out, even when I worked at the Colbert Report, I remember thinking, these people have never heard my jokes. And as a journalist, even when you're repeating something, I think, as you mentioned, the conditions change. So yes, Trump met Putin in Helsinki, said what he said, gave him the hug, but that was before Putin invaded Russia. So I think now that the circumstances...
He didn't invade Crimea before that.
Fair enough. But the circumstances change.
Trump years.
And so the comments have more or less weight. But more importantly, I just try to pretend that my audience, whoever I'm talking to or in front of, has not heard this before. Because, new people come to the scene, and if somebody's not heard, somebody's got to win, Tara Palmeri or style. When I start record, I think of the people that don't know who I am and what I do. And I try to maybe think they're hearing it for the first time. And then I also think, obviously, as you're saying, a lot of people have been hearing it forever. How do I change the same thing? I think that's the struggle, but that's our job. And I think you do a really good job of it from what I've heard, which is why I invited you.
Yeah, I'm trying. I just I'm trying to, you're right. I remember the first time I heard Nikki Haley say the thing about the heels and Margaret Thatcher. I was like, oh, that's a good line. And the person sitting next to me who had been following her around New Hampshire for the past month or so was like, oh my God, I've heard that so many times. And
if I could take a liberty, I looked up your age. It looks like mid-30s, but in your career age, you're 80. Like you've seen and done pretty much everything that you can do, but new people are coming to you and to your pretty cool, innovative media outlet, Puck. And we want them to. We all want new people to come and hear us. So I just always try to reinvent maybe the way that you're doing it. But let me let you go. I've talked too much. But I'm
sorry I'm asking you for all this professional advice. I just see you as a pro in this space, and I'm still new to it.
I'm flattered by it all, but I'm happy to talk to you more, off if it's not interesting to people to hear.
We're giving advice to everyone who wants to be a political podcaster.
No, I think what we're doing, I think this part of the conversation that'll air is like, these are the things that we think about and struggle with and wonder about how best to cover these issues and to inform people. And to do what's in the public's interest is the question I ask myself. Is this in the public's interest? Will this impact people? So I don't report on like some rare murder or horrible, if it bleeds, it leads. I talk about how many people are going to die or be impacted by this policy. So let's end on a high note. Like I said, you've done it. You've seen it. You've been like profiled in all these really cool, hip Washington Reporter profiles. Like if you Google Tara Palmeri, you'll see.
Oh gosh. What's
the most fun opportunity or thing that you've done? I've always wondered. I've been to White House Correspondents' Dinner a bunch of times, and I always think that's really cool. But you've been on Air Force One. You've been in the White House. So just if you could brag and be immodest about an opportunity that you had in your job, interviewing someone or being somewhere, what's a really fun, unique thing that you maybe never thought you'd have the opportunity to do, and you're like, holy shit, this is happening?
Yeah, this is one that always, if you want to have the most attention at the dinner party, which is horrible to say this, but I have been to North Korea and I stayed in Kim Jong-un's guest house. Yeah. Crazy. And then I got kicked out of his guest house with the rest of the State Department team. I was one of 5 media outlets that got to go to North Korea with Mike Pompeo. It was crazy.
Ooh,
yeah.
Did you take? I mean, I know what I'd do. If I would steal.
Oh, no, there were cameras everywhere. And it was so bad. We had to communicate with our hands over our mouths. It was so crazy. And then he was angry.
Where's Tara? She's not coming back.
Yeah, no, I left my clothes there, which is kind of hilarious because I didn't know we were being kicked out. And so I left a lot of my clothes there. Yeah.
They're going to show up on somebody. You're going to be like, is that my blouse?
I feel like the North Koreans would be swimming in my clothing, but they have it and it's fine. It's a donation.
Wow.
That's so hard to be there, but it was not hard. I mean, it was the most amazing experience, and you want to know why I got to go? This is the best part. So I love how you flatter me so much, but when I was at the White House, I was the 3rd ranking White House correspondent. Jon Carroll was the chief. Cecilia Vega was the senior one.
And I was within ABC News.
Yeah, within ABC News, and I was the White House correspondent. So that meant I was doing weekends, the shitty shifts, holidays, the times when they didn't want to work, not want to work, but the times when they wanted their time off.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Well, it just so happened that at the last minute, Mike Pompeo was invited to North Korea, and it's over July 4th weekend, and all the top correspondents, Martha Raddatz was in Hawaii, Cecilia had this trip, Jon Carroll had that trip, and little me, I'm ready for North Korea. Here I come. So I got to go to North Korea at 31. And then afterwards we went to Afghanistan, which was really sad. That was hard to go to and see, which, I mean, North Korea is totally is depressing as well, but they tried to make it look cheery for us as visitors. And yeah, it was a whirlwind trip. It was like the trip of a lifetime. It really was.
What was Afghanistan like? When were you there? At what point before the evacuation?
It was in 2017, I believe, or 2018. And when you looked, we were in Ospreys. So the bottom of the helicopter is open, so you can see down below you. And it was just completely like detonated. It was just the wreckage of the war.
Were you there? Were you there with Pompeo?
Yeah, I was there with Pompeo. And then we went to Islamabad. We went to the palace in blanking on the name of the palace. Yeah, Kabul. But we had to do like a fake landing. And then we went to one of the NATO camps there. Yeah, that was really sad to see the way that this country, the way it looked from above. Yeah. It really, the impact of the war was there and it was real. So
I really appreciate talking to you. This is really fun. I hope we can do it again. And
thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
I've learned so much from you.
Somebody's got to win with Tara Palmeri. Go listen to it right now. I'm going to hit stop and then I'll say goodbye.
Thanks.
All right, there she goes, Tara Palmeri. I really would appreciate it if you'd reach out and let her know how much you appreciated her joining me, and I'll definitely try to be getting her back more regularly because I really enjoyed that conversation and her perspective and coverage. Let me know what you think, and please tweet her, follow her on Instagram and TikTok as well. She's doing her own thing. Really good work over there at Puck, so check it out. All right, that's all I've got for you on today's show, but look forward to more. Probably put out a bonus episode today, and so give you a heads up on that. Thank you very much, you bumblebees, for listening all the way to the end here, and I look forward to talking to you later. That's it. That's all. Jon Carroll taking us out. Bye-bye. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up. Stand up. Point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. While you lying awake wondering where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right. We got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand.